Welcome everybody to the last lecture on documentary photography. Tonight we welcome Chris King, documentary photographer and portrait photographer from Ireland, but based in London, who will lecture on the food we waste and how to maybe find a solution or try to find a solution to that. Well, welcome, Chris King. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the organizers, everybody involved in kind of making this happen. It's a real privilege, and I feel very honored to be presenting my work and just discussing the issue of food waste with everybody. And thank you everybody for making their way here, because I know that it's a bit of a challenge, especially those who are coming from Central Florence. So thank you for making the effort, and I hope it's worth your while. What I'm going to present tonight is basically kind of a mixture of the work that I've created over the past couple of years on the issue of food waste, and then also kind of touching on the issue itself, and just kind of sharing a bit of the information that I've managed to kind of obtain over this period. This is a conversation, so please, if you have a burning question, stop me and ask me. It's not a problem, because I will ramble on. It's going to be a structured ramble, because that's what my slideshow is for, to keep me on track. But yeah, please feel free to interject and ask any questions that you have along the way. And yeah, so hopefully there's something for everybody. There'll be a balance between photography and activism. Okay, so I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning trying to make that work. So hope everybody caught that. It's a nice little transition there. So why food waste? Why did I decide to explore the issue of food waste and just start documenting rotten veg and rotting fruit? And really it's because it's something that I've been conscious of for a very long time. 15 odd years ago, I was living and working in Amsterdam, and I would actually survive off food that I was gathering from markets, food that would otherwise go to waste. And I was involved in environmental, social justice related issues. And so I've been conscious about it. I've lived overseas in developing countries and very much aware of food security or insecurity as well. So that consciousness has been there, and I was just looking for something to really kind of embrace and immerse myself in. And the issue of food waste is something that kind of spans many different, it has many different layers to it. And it kind of, if you impact positively on food waste, you impact positively on all the issues of our time. So things like climate change, deforestation, water security, food security, the power of the biotech firms, Monsanto and Syngenta. You impact positively on all those things if you actually do something about food waste. So in many respects, it's a bit of a silver bullet. And so for me, I just felt that it would be a great opportunity to focus my time and energy in what would hopefully be a productive and meaningful exploration. So this is a little fact to kick things off. 20 to 40% of the food that we produce doesn't get eaten. So obviously that varies from country to country, and the reasons differ from developing countries to developed, so-called developed. And the likes of the US would be the higher end of the scale, around 40%. And the reasons for this are many, but ultimately it's criminal. It's something that we all need to do something about. We're all part of the problem, but we're also part of the solution. And what I wanted to do was just basically understand the dynamics of the issue more, and just try and raise awareness about the things around the issue. So again, so we go from that little fact to a visual representation of it. This is about 2.5 kilos of parsnips that were being left to rot because the supermarket wasn't willing to pay enough to actually make it economically viable for the farmer to harvest it. pack it and transport it to the supermarket. And that's one of the issues, is that the supermarket is kind of just relinquished all kind of, or forced upon the farmers to take responsibility of so much more than simply growing the food. They have to grade it, they have to pack it, they have to wash it, they have to transport it. It's all been pushed down onto the farmer. And obviously the margins are minuscule. So it's very fickle, and I was actually at a farm recently where an entire crop, so this is about, in total there was about 20 tons of parsnips that were just being left to rot for no good reason. And I went to a farm recently where an entire crop of green beans were being left to rot because of soil splash, which in England is just absurd because it's inevitable. If anybody's been there, it's a pretty wet country, and the beans are growing outside, not in polytunnels, so soil splash is an inevitability. But this supermarket was refusing an entire crop because of soil splash. And there are things like this, and cosmetic standards, all these different reasons why a lot of food just gets wasted at a farm level. And so part of the work that I've been doing is to try and explore this and just shine a spotlight on it, because it's very much hidden. But as you'll see as we progress, I didn't want to focus on the issue so much, or the problem, but more of the solution. Because in the mainstream media coverage, while it's growing, they focus on the problems. So over the past 2 years, there was pretty much nothing when I began the project, very, very little. And then gradually over the past couple of years, there has been some sort of attention. You may have come across, I'm sure, a situation in France trying to introduce a law. Unfortunately, it didn't actually get through because it was too late. So there was all this media attention saying, oh, this is wonderful, going to happen. And then very little media attention about the fact that it didn't actually come to pass. But this law where supermarkets would have to donate any surplus food to charities. So there has been that, obviously raised awareness amongst the general population, but generally speaking, the mainstream media are focusing on the problems. So, and this is true of American press, US press, as well as UK press, and I'm sure it's true of European press in general. So, all very much focusing on the problem. And that previous image is something that I've been asked for by various organizations, is to capture big piles of rotting veg. They're not really interested in the deeper stories, the other layers, the subtleties, and the stories, the things that are actually happening to try and reduce the amount of food that's going to waste. Instead, they want all these sensational images, which is something that I personally don't want to explore. What I want to do is document people and organizations fighting to reduce the amount of available food waste. So focusing on the positive, because I think if you ever introduce a problem, in the next breath, you should introduce a solution to it. And with the work that I'm doing, I very much want to raise awareness about everything that's being done about the issue to try and minimize food waste, and help support and raise awareness about the great work that so many people are doing to try and make that happen, and reduce the amount of edible food that is needlessly going to waste. So very much focusing on the positive, a positive news story, and hopefully informing people of organizations that they can engage with and support. So this was one of the first organizations based in London, Food Cycle. And as a personal project, so I think a lot of you are photographers, and a lot of you may be exploring a personal project or the beginnings of it. And for me, what I wanted to do was not just explore something that I was passionate about, but also something that was manageable, something that was sustainable, something that I could explore in depth and over a sustained period, and not just in a superficial way. So I had to make it as accessible as possible. And so I very much focused on my doorstep. And I think that's something that often is overlooked, is the fact that there are so many stories that are happening right in front of us. And especially in this era where, well, you know, we all know about the refugee crisis and everything that's going on in Greece, and there are all these things that are happening right on our doorstep, and obviously even closer than that, that we can explore. We don't need to hop in a plane and fly off to India or you know, Afghanistan and the likes. There's lots of stuff happening that isn't getting any sort of media attention, is going unreported or underreported, but deserves some sort of attention. And so I think as personal projects go, I think it's important to remember that. And you know, if your motivation is to actually create positive change and to have an impact, then really, and in a manageable way, sustainable way, then you should never look beyond your doorstep. So, food cycle. First organization, didn't know what I was doing, so just launched myself into it. Had just got myself a camera that actually had video functionality. So as we'll see later on, I kind of explored that a little bit, experimented with it. But I just launched myself in, contacted this organization, and they were very open and receptive to me documenting their activities. So they actually go around various markets. There are hubs all around the UK, and it's volunteer-based. They come together, they go to markets and supermarkets, and they gather food that would otherwise go to waste. So they then take that and they go to an underused community kitchen where they create a 3-course meal. And it's amazing to see the volunteers, complete strangers, come together and just function in a very, well, generally speaking, and in front of me, I'm sure it's not the case all the time, but they just gelled and everybody worked brilliantly together because they were focused on doing the best that they possibly could for the people that they were trying to feed. So they feed people suffering from mental health issues and food insecurity, and all they know is they don't know how many people they're going to feed, and they don't know what food they're going to get. They don't know the hub leader doesn't actually know how many volunteers they're going to have, so there are all these different variables. The only kind of static element is the fact that they know they've got to do 3 courses in a period of 3 hours. So it's amazing to see them just gather up that food, then assess what they've got and think, right, we're going to do this, this, and this, and then they get to it and they make it happen. And so this was a tiny kitchen, so it was a challenge to not get in people's way. And from there, I was obviously just trying to explore and find out about other organizations. Food Cycle was basically just the first that came to my attention through a Google search. And then obviously from communication and trying to kind of connect with people around the issue of food waste, then I came across these guys, Plan Zeros. So this is an organization that is essentially trying to connect organizations that are surplus producing. I'm not a fan, every time I say surplus, I'll always do this because I can't stand the use of that word. But the alternative is very convoluted. So otherwise, you know, the reality is it's edible food that needlessly goes to waste, essentially. But within the industry, they like to call it surplus. They don't want to be associated with the word waste. So if you talk to supermarkets and markets, anybody who kind of runs them, they'll say surplus food. So these guys put together surplus producers of food and connect them with organizations, non-profits that would like to utilize that food in some meaningful way. So the likes of soup kitchens and homeless shelters, and they just make that connection. They've created a map, and it's just London focused again. So this is very much within the urban environment and on a very local level, but they're connecting those people and those organizations, and they're doing a fantastic job of it. So the one kind of connection that I documented was between the organization, so this is Jacopo in Italian, and a lady whose name I've forgotten, who runs the Dragon Cafe. So this is a cafe that basically tries to help people with mental health issues, and they take this food that would otherwise go to waste, and they turn it into meals again. And this is Borough Market. So if anybody's been to London, this is a really vibrant, dynamic market in the heart of London. It's 1,000 years old. It's the oldest market, and it's also a charity, which is fantastic. So this organization, Plan Zeros, has connected with them and got 17 stall holders to basically donate food that would otherwise go to waste and contribute to the meals of these organizations. So just documenting that. This was pretty much the first collection. It's been going on for about a year or so now, and it's just grown, and so there are lots more organizations benefiting from this. And as I say, like Plan Zeros has created an online platform with a map that organizations can place themselves on and make the connections themselves. So we'll launch into this bit. So this reduce, reuse, recycle. I'm sure everybody's come across this in terms of actually recycling plastic and cardboard and the likes. And there's a very similar concept when it comes to food. And essentially it's about reduce, redistribute, recycle, and then obviously that little red section that nobody wants to participate in is the actual disposal of it. So it's that same kind of sequence. You should first of all try and reduce. If you can't do that, then redistribute. And if you can't do that, then recycle in the form of composting or anaerobic digestion. So in terms of reduction, just a few facts, just to kind of set the scene. So American families throw out approximately 25% of the food and beverages they buy. And I know I should reference these in an academic environment, and I'm sorry I haven't, but they are from good sources, I assure you. I think that's from Jonathan Bloom, actually, who has written a book called American Waste, which would be worth a read. So there's a real need to reduce the amount of food that we're wasting, and as individuals, even if we don't necessarily engage with organizations that are doing something proactive to try and address the issue of food waste, as individuals, there's still a huge amount that we can do. And essentially that's basically just stop wasting as much of the food that we are buying. And there are different ways of achieving that. Just being aware of what's in your fridge. Meal planning is a really effective way, so you always know what you're doing and when. Shopping more frequently, so instead of doing a big shop in the supermarket, actually going there every day or every other day. There are lots of these different measures that we can take, and obviously just understanding how to store vegetables and fruit and the likes effectively. And so there are all these different things that we can do, and that's another thing about the food waste issue, is that there are no barriers to participating in it. It's something that it doesn't matter your political affiliation, your religious kind of beliefs, if you have any, and it doesn't matter about your ethnic background, it doesn't matter about your education or your wealth. There are no barriers to participating in this. It's simply just reducing the amount of food that you waste. And we all benefit from it because it's less money wasted as well, but also obviously the impact on the environment and everything that's embedded in the food that we're wasting. Then redistribution. So I know this is a controversial topic, the redistribution of food. But so there's a little fact, 48.1 million Americans lived in food insecure households. So food insecurity is basically, that just means that from time to time, people just don't know where the next meal is coming from. So in a rural environments, if you're a subsistence farmer, that might take the form of, during harvest period, you're food secure and you're fine. But then, at other periods of the year, you're going to be food insecure. You don't know, you're going to struggle. And in an urban environment, that might mean a single mum with a part-time job, not earning enough to actually kind of pay the bills and the likes. And then, every so often, she's not able to actually get the food that she needs to have a balanced diet. So there are just an insane number of people who are suffering from food insecurity. And that's, not just the US, of course, but I think that's about 15% of the population, which when so much food is going to waste is criminal, really. So after that, obviously if it's edible, then it should be given to human beings, and we should eat it. And that's the best kind of use of that kind of calorific value associated with food. If it's not edible, then the next best thing is to feed it to pigs. And once upon a time, for millennia, I'm sure, this was the case, you know, we could do that. But then 2002, foot and mouth disease, everybody freaked out and put this ban on pig swill. So since 2002, it hasn't been possible to actually feed pigs pig swill, which is basically scraps, stuff that byproduct of us going out and having a nice meal in a restaurant. So any sort of retail scraps and stuff, that is not allowed to be fed to pigs. There are certain kind of industrial byproducts, which we'll see in a wee minute, that can be fed to pigs, and fruit and veg that would otherwise go to waste can be fed. But you know, there isn't that ability to tap into that massive amount of waste that otherwise isn't edible, that is ending up in the landfill and therefore contributing to climate change. So yeah, it's a ridiculous ban, and it should be lifted, and there is a campaign to fight against it, which we'll see in a minute. And then, of course, there's the last resort, which we don't want to do, but I think about what is significant in the 90s in terms of 90-odd% is actually still ending up in landfill. And the significance of that is that when food decomposes anaerobically, so it just turns into methane, and methane is 21 times more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So it's a massive contributor to climate change. And so obviously if we can avoid getting it, putting it into landfill, that would be fantastic for the environment, you know, in terms of impacting positively on climate change. So obviously the way to do that is to follow this, reduce redistribution and recycling. I didn't get a little fact for recycling, but anaerobic digestion is what that's talking about. So composting, obviously on a small scale, or anaerobic digestion, which is taking the food and decomposing it in a controlled environment and then converting that into energy. But you know, this pyramid also represents, in terms of the efficiency of the calories embedded in the food. So obviously, you know, if we actually feed people, that's the best use. Feeding pigs, you know, the benefits from that in terms of the calorific value obtained from the pigs when we slaughter it is not as good as if we fed people directly. And then so we go down, and the calorific value, the energy kind of captured from anaerobic digestion is not as great as it would be for livestock and so on. So it's, but at the same time, anaerobic digestion is something that, I don't know what the situation is here in Italy, but in the UK, they're really pushing it because it's a very typical Western approach, which is instead of dealing with the root causes, we'll just look at a symptom and we'll try and address that, or we'll kind of stick a plaster on it. And also it's about business, because you can very quickly make a huge amount of money out of anaerobic digestion, because you benefit from the collection, you benefit from the compost, the byproducts, you benefit from the energy. So it's just a win-win-win for anybody who creates one of these digesters. So that's why local governments and supermarkets are all about zero waste, zero to landfill. But that means it's going to these anaerobic digesters instead of actually redistributing that food and putting it to better use. So that sets the scene for the next project that I documented, which is the pig idea. So this is a campaign that is essentially trying to fight the ban on the use of pig swill to feed pigs. And it basically takes the form of gathering food that would otherwise go to waste, feeding it to pigs. Those pigs get fattened, slaughtered, and then fed to 5,000 people, which is actually happening in, well, I don't know if they're going to use pigs, but in Milan on World Food Day, if anybody can make their way up there, there will be a Feeding the 5,000 event outside the gate of the expo. So if you can make it, it would definitely be worth it. And you can learn more about this issue. So the pig idea feeds into that campaign. And what I did was just explore that process, the start from finish. So this is cheese production, and if you do ever make it to Borough Market, you will see this cheese stand where they sell raclette, and you will see a queue just kind of snaking all the way around Borough Market because it is so good. It is amazing. And these are the guys that produce that cheese, so capecasein. And the byproduct, the whey, which is in that container, that's what's kind of siphoned off and used to feed the pigs. So this was kind of taken, and then also okara, so a byproduct of tofu production. And so there's actually tofu made in the center of London, this organic tofu, which I had no idea. It's just off Brick Lane, which, if anybody knows London, is a very busy district with lots of Indian restaurants. And just off that street is this tofu producer that's been there for like 15 years. So that's another benefit of exploring, projects, photographic projects in depth, the story, so really getting under the skin of it, because you just bump into really interesting people and interesting organizations, and you find out so much about your city that you would otherwise be oblivious to. So we gathered that, and then we took it to the farm. So this is a city farm, Stepney City Farm, and they get this, I think it's once a week that they go through this whole process. And then they take the bananas and other fruit, anything else, and they make this swill, and then they feed it to the pigs. And as you can see, the pigs love it. They went crazy for it, which again, is just, when you think about the amount of deforestation that's occurring globally, but also in specifically the Amazon, a huge amount of deforestation that's occurring to basically clear the land for livestock production, but also to grow soya for the livestock. And so there's a huge amount of devastation that's happening, and obviously that's contributing to climate change and lots of different things for the sake of fattening pigs and rearing livestock. So, if it was possible to actually use food that would otherwise go to waste, then it means that you're going to impact positively on deforestation. You're going to reduce the amount of the Amazon that's going to be left or going to be destroyed as a consequence of feeding livestock like these pigs. So that's the thing, you just think that food waste is innocuous, that what's the issue of throwing away your burger half-eaten? But in one burger you've got 660 gallons of water to produce that one burger. So you've eaten half your burger at McDonald's and you throw it away, then you've thrown away 330 gallons of water, plus also the pesticides and all the fuel that was consumed to actually transport it. So just in that half a burger. And that's the thing, it's just, it's not so innocuous. Every little piece just kind of adds up. And there's enough to feed the chickens as well. So up until that point, I was photographing. I was just exploring stills because that's what I was used to. It's all I knew. But as I mentioned, I'd just got a camera that allowed for me to explore video. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to, at all points in this story, I've been trying to refine my storytelling abilities, because ultimately it's not about just kind of getting your camera out and taking pretty photos. It's also about trying to tell a story and engage people and to basically bring them on a journey and ultimately hopefully have a positive response at the end of it. So at all stages I've been trying to understand effective storytelling and what I need to do to get people to care and get people to engage with the story and the issue and actually do something about it. So I kind of, went from photography to general visual storytelling. And I'm self-taught, so I don't have, really embedded roots in the art of photography. So for me, while I've got a real love and respect for analog photography, film photography in the darkroom, for me the key thing is the storytelling, the audience, and that, telling an effective story, a good story. So I'm not loyal to any sort of format. I just want to tell a good story and to make a difference and to raise awareness about these issues. So I was more than happy to explore video and immerse myself in that, even though I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And what you'll see next is my first attempt at doing exactly that. So it was unscripted. All I did was, with Food Cycle, I kind of went in and I photographed for a while. You know, I went to several venues and went time and time again to take as many photographs as possible. And then I organized other visits where I just dedicated that to audio and video. So it was quite luxurious, you know, they were very open to that. And I haven't done it since because the amount of time and energy that is involved in actually exploring those things, because I think if anybody's actually tried that, you need to kind of focus on photography, and then you need to focus on videography and audio. It's very difficult to do both at the same time, and you make compromises if you try and do that. But it is a luxury to be able to do that around a given subject. So, as I say, this is unscripted and just captured what I could and then pieced it together as best I could, and you'll see the product.
We've got 1, 52, 53, 4, 5, 72, 66. You know, this has come straight from the farm to here. Yeah, they have one everywhere. Good talk now. Look at them.
9.
Add it into everything. Do you want to do it all at once or just like two? I think just put them all in is fine, yeah. Put it all in.
Of course.
He's close to the side, right? Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Oh, nice, man.
So that was my first attempt at doing multimedia, and yeah, it was an experience. It was a real challenge because obviously with multimedia, then you start kind of trying to piece things together. It's not like stills imagery where you're trying to sequence things effectively and tell a story through that sequencing. But here you've got to introduce audio, which is an art in itself, to get a good audio. And then the moving image as well. And obviously with this, it was a bit easier because you know, I was just taking little snippets. But if you're actually using and exploring video in terms of your storytelling more widely, it's a different ball game, and it's a real challenge to kind of make that transition from stills to video. Because you know, with video, you're capturing that fleeting moment, and you can always just edit afterwards. But with video, you've got to capture you know, some sequence of some event, and you've got to do that effectively. You've got to compose it. You've got to make sure you've pressed record, and all these different things, you know, and the number of times, and especially DSLRs. That's the thing. You know, DSLRs aren't really made for videography. So the number of times that I've been caught out because I've been so focused on composition, and that wee red flashing light has not been flashing. So yeah, it was a challenge, but I enjoyed it, and it also just really kind of solidified within me the need and the desire to explore something visually more engaging than stills, and just appreciating that something like food waste, which has so many different layers and is such a complex issue, that stills just didn't justify it. It didn't say enough, and so that was the kind of first venture into something multimedia. So everybody's been very quiet, and either that's because you're enthralled by everything that I'm saying, or you can't understand a word I'm saying because of my accent. But either way, I'm afraid you're going to have to engage with me now. So, as I was saying, you know, I'm constantly trying to refine and understand how to be an effective storyteller. And that was my first venture into moving image. But, you know, I'm never going to be content, so I wanted to refine things further. So, how to get people to care about rotting veg. There's so much happening in this world. And people are bombarded by it on a daily basis. You know, even if they proactively don't go out and try and inform themselves, they're still bombarded by it. So how do you get them to actually care about rotting vegetables? How would you guys do it? Visually, obviously. Any ideas? Any suggestions even?
Something has to be done to help the farmers, so
Okay.
they are not producing 2 tons of parsnips is horrifying amount of parsnips. It really is.
And that was just a fraction of what was actually being wasted.
So somehow, you've got 2 very separate things. You've got an overproduction of food, which may be economically necessary for the farmers, but the farmers are caught in a business module which works for non-perishable materials. You know, with clothes, 40% is going to be sold at discount, 20%, even less, etc. But you cannot do that with food that's perishable.
No.
And yet there's obviously a break-even point for how much a farmer needs to produce.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the problems.
Okay. Well, yeah, so...
Do you know if anything is being done to address it at that level, at the basic production level?
There is. Well, on some level. So the farm is a very good idea to kind of get out of the urban environment and get into the farm, because the urban environment is a bit more visible. The farm is invisible, and the extent of the waste is massive. And also because, you know, at a household level, you're talking about, say, in the UK, where there's 64 million people, each person functioning as an individual, you've got to try and change the habits of 64 million people, roughly speaking. Whereas if you target farms, you're talking about, you know, tens of thousands, and they all function the same. Whereas, you know, as individuals, we function differently. We've got different backgrounds, different habits, different tastes and the likes. So to actually change the habits uniformly is going to be a real challenge. But at a farm level, because they have this economic kind of, or just this method of functioning, then it would make sense to actually focus on the farm, but that's not happening. You know, the supermarkets are trying to divert the attention on the consumer, on the household. So yeah, we very much need to kind of put the spotlight on the farm and raise awareness about what's happening there. And there is an organization, and it so happens that I had the same conclusion as yourself and decided to go onto the farm. And there is an organization in the UK called the Gleaning Network, which is part of a bigger organization called Feedback, which is run or founded by a man called Kristen Stewart. So if anybody has done any research prior to coming to this talk, they will have discovered Kristen Stewart. He is like Mr. Food Waste, and he wrote a book in 2009 called Waste, catchy title, and he's the go-to person. So he started this organization, and the Gleaning Network is part of that. And they basically go to farms and they gather up food that, you know, post-harvest, they go into the farms, gather up food, and then they redistribute that. And the network is going beyond the UK now. It's now European-wide. and in the US as well. And it is something, gleaning is something that it dates back to biblical times. You know, it's been around, but then in the UK, because it's all about private property, then, you know, 100, 200 years ago, it was banned. In mainland Europe, I think, I'm not sure about Italy, but in Spain and France, gleaning still happens. It's still very much a community experience. So post-harvest, the farmer opens the gates and allows people to come onto his land and harvest it. So yeah, so the farm is definitely something else to explore. Any other ideas?
This may seem like a silly question, but I still don't understand why we haven't come up with a world project, you know, why we're throwing milk, you know, away and wheat in the ocean and this sort of thing, because, for example, another thing I think is important is not that many people know about composting. For example, you slid right by it. And a lot of people don't compost because they think it's terribly complicated. And it's one of nature's incredible miracles, that everything we eat and everything we waste that is natural goes back to the earth and turns into good soil. So I think these are two problems that we have to take care of, because how can people worry about rotting vegetables when we're throwing wheat in the ocean and not feeding people around the world? So I wouldn't worry about wasting food. I would worry about these two things, because one would be to organize, for example, if we had a world organization, farmers could grow the amount that they need to grow. And part of it could go to the public, and part of it could go to the people that need it around the world. And the second thing is what's wasted. I mean, trash seems to be a problem. Trash will turn in, I'm sure, in the next 10 years, one of the greatest money makers that's ever been. And we're just calling it trash. And the same with wasted food. So maybe you have an answer to these things for me.
Well, there are lots of small kind of startups that are trying to monetize food waste, you know, food that would otherwise go to waste. And they're across Europe. There are lots of organizations that are trying to do that. So turn a byproduct of a deeply flawed system into something with some sort of value, economic value. So that is happening. And in terms of composting, you know, that's quite, you know, it's not as accessible really, because not everybody's got a garden, not everybody's got the possibility to compost. Well, yes, they should. Yeah, and in London, depending on which borough you're in, they do, and various other kind of cities around Europe. So that is happening. But that's going to anaerobic digestion. And as I was saying, you know, the calorific value, the return on that in terms of calories it's very inefficient relative to actually getting that into the mouths of people or into the mouths of animals, you know, pigs and the like. So it's actually, you know, it's not the most efficient. So that's why I was kind of a bit dismissive maybe of that, because I feel the focus is wrongly focused on anaerobic digestion, on composting. I think, and others would agree with me, that it's better to reduce, redistribute, and then recycle.
I meant everything should be done, what you were saying. It all makes sense.
Okay, good.
But we need to answer, I think, the big problem,
Yep.
which is why are we going?
Well, that's the thing, yeah, it's just a deeply flawed system. In the US, it's as deeply flawed as it gets with the USDA and the likes and how they function. But yeah, and also it's a system that has been engineered also by the supermarkets in a very large part. So they benefit at the expense of the suppliers and at the expense of the consumer as well in many respects. So that's something that needs to be, their power and influence needs to be broken. But that requires us, you know, to actually stand up and use our power as consumers to, instead of supporting the supermarkets, making the effort to go to a farmer's market or, you know, a local food market, go to the grocers, start supporting local independent shops. So it's us, you know, we need to do that, and we can reduce the power and influence of the supermarkets. If we do that, if we hurt their pocket and we say the reason why we're doing this is because we don't like the way you function, then that could have a positive impact and reduce the flaws within the system. But those are, so if we take those things, and obviously that was focusing more on the issue, the story, but visually, my answer to this question was to make it more about the people. So it was about taking portraits. So it was, when you're lost, you kind of, was that going to be your suggestion? Was that going to be your suggestion? Or?
Oh, yeah.
No?
I was going to say you could maybe set up like a secondary market for the, like just, I don't know, regular people, that you could explain to them that they're not being sold in the grocery stores simply because, for cosmetic reasons, and that they're still totally viable. And, and I think that would probably, especially like at a reduced cost, and I think that might get people's attention.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because there is an organization that is based in Florence called Senza Spreco that is doing exactly that. And we have a representative in the back corner. I don't know if she can stay until the end, but yeah, there is an organization that's trying to do exactly that, right on your doorstep. And they've got plenty of consumers, and they just need more suppliers. But and that's happening around Europe. But yeah, it's another good idea, and it's another good initiative that is happening, and hopefully it needs your support ultimately. So if you think it's a good idea, then pick up one of these flyers at the end, and you can engage with that organization. But in terms, again, so visually, that's more, again, the story. But visually, I kind of went back to what I knew, which is portraits. And I just feel that any story, it's difficult for people to connect with an inanimate object and have emotions and feelings for that object. But when it comes to people, they can associate with them, they can engage with them, they can connect, they can empathize, they can see themselves in that person's shoes. So I just felt that if I actually made it more about the people and got their stories and understand why they were doing what they were doing and share those with the people, with the audience, the people who were kind of looking at my work, then it might be more effective in terms of both raising awareness about the issue, but also the solutions and the organizations. So I just started taking these portraits, which in itself was a challenge for me in different respects, because my style is very much about being over people's shoulders, having the camera in my hand, and just trying not to impose myself on people. I find it very difficult to impose myself and ask people to kind of let me in and do things and the likes. So I was kind of, reluctant to do that. But I forced myself to do it, and I'm glad I did. And I put the camera on a tripod and with a little remote trigger, and started just engaging with people and talking to them, and then taking the portrait. So I was taking the camera out of my hands and making it a bit more static, and also just kind of getting it to just grind the project, because as you'll see, previously all the images are quite dynamic, and that can get a bit repetitive, and again, it's just a lot of things, a lot of backs of people's heads, and a lot of these different activities. So I felt that this would grind the project as well, and give people a break from all those kind of dynamic images, and then just connect with these people. So I just took portraits after portraits, and there's Julia. So I took this morning in Sant'Angelo Market. Ambrogio, thank you. Sant'Ambrogio Market this morning. So with natural light, and all of them pretty much have been with natural light. And that, again, that's poses a challenge, because when you go onto the farm, as I did last weekend, I had the sun just beaming down, which is a rare occurrence. But it's just those kind of things, when you're using natural light, then you need to kind of adapt and try and do the best you can with what you've got. So it's Julia. Julia works for Senza Spreco. So if anybody wants to kind of find out more, then yep. And so I just made portrait after portrait, and I've dubbed it Food Waste Warriors. And I'm just kind of, as I go along, so here we've got gleaners up at the top. We've got I should use this little thing, should I? There we go, look at that. This is a shopkeeper, Tolga, and he donates food that would otherwise, he would have to otherwise throw out, and donates it to organizations that can benefit from it. This lady is, a doctor in food anthropology, and she's started up an organization that you'll learn a little bit more about shortly. And then these guys are gleaners, more gleaners, and So just capturing these people and trying to tell their stories. So with each image, I've also been capturing audio. So I ask people questions and try and understand why they're there, what their motivations are, and their thoughts on food waste and what they think should be done about it. So that was my approach from a visual point of view. And this is one of the other organizations that I then explored. So I haven't made it onto the farm yet, but I will. And I'll let somebody else tell you about this.
I am Brigida Marovelli, and I run the Dinner Exchange East since 2011. And the Dinner Exchange is a project against food waste. And it started as a vegan project, so we were basically cooking 100% or 90% of food that we would rescue from being wasted. And now it's very different. So we actually call it upcycling food waste, because we buy fair trade and organic and local ingredients, and we try to make the food look nice and taste even better. So, and the aim is to show that food waste is not only edible, but it's nutritious and good, and it can even be gourmet.
So that's Dinner Exchange East. And as you'll see there, I was trying to have a mixture of dynamic images and then grounded and, you know, a pause, a break in between with stills and portraits of individuals, plus then adding that layer of audio so people kind of understand who they are and what they're all about. So from there, I got myself onto the farms, negotiated access. So the first time, I think, was about a year ago now, and this is the organization, and again, I'll just let you hear about it.
Okay, hi, my name's Dan. I'm the manager of the Gleaning Network, which is a project run by Feeding the 5,000, a charity that is all about campaigning against the various issues of food waste. It's insane that we have a system that on one hand has huge levels of food waste, and on the other hand has people going hungry. You know, the fact that those two coexist in a society is a symptom of madness. So partly what we're doing is collecting the food and getting to hungry mouths, but really it's as much about raising awareness.
I think it's about an estimated 10% of Europe's carbon emissions come from growing and transporting food that's never eaten. That can be cancelled at detriment to nobody's quality of life. Hello, so I'm Martin. I work as Gleaning Coordinator for Gleaning Network UK. All that environmental stuff is on top of the social injustices of, you know, there are about 1 billion people worldwide who are suffering from malnutrition, and also in the UK itself there are about 5.8 million people suffering from food insecurity, and to have that alongside all of this food going to waste is absolutely gut-wrenching. They have 2 hands. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah, waving.
Well, a third of overall food gets wasted, they say, between farm and fork. So obviously at different levels, retailers, consumers and so on, but a lot of that is at farm level, predominantly driven by supermarket standards, cosmetic standards, the insistence on low prices, the refusal to buy above a certain amount that they forecast. All leaves food to go to rot into the ground, like we've seen today. You know, we're walking around now, there's more apples than I've ever seen in my whole life being left on the trees. In addition to that, there's apples on the ground that are literally rotting into the ground. It's insane.
So that was taken over 3 visits to 3 different farms, and that spanned maybe a 6-month period. And that's another thing about a personal project is obviously access. When you're dependent on an organization or external organizations, then you're dependent on them. You need to collaborate with them. You know, if they can't give you access or they're only available certain dates and stuff, then everything's dictated by them. So these trips to the farms, in reality, I've been exploring this topic for about 2 years, but in actual fact, in terms of the amount of time that I've had the camera in my hand, it maybe equates to like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It just spans that period. Obviously, within that time, I've been going out and networking, connecting with people and trying to find out more about the issue and to gain access to different things and different locations. But it is something that is very much a long-term project. And I think it's just something that you need to accept, that if you do have that dependency on external organizations, then it is going to be a long game. But the benefit being that you then get to explore the subject in more depth. It's not as superficial as it would be otherwise. And you get known, and people start phoning you up and asking you to come along to their events or to document them. And that's the consequence, of doing this, is just over a long period of time. It's a small, because it's a niche subject, then people get to know you, and it's a small community. So there are benefits from finding that kind of niche subject as a photographer and really kind of delving into it and immersing yourself into that. So yes. Now another question. Again, there's been silence, but you're going to have to engage with me once again. Where's the audience, generally speaking? Any suggestions?
Countries with a large amount of consumption and therefore overconsumption, and then they end up wasting a large amount of the food.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, people who have access to information and the internet, for example, so people who can inform themselves. Yeah, essentially that is the answer. It's the internet. Because for me, again, it's that, because I don't have strong roots within photography as an art form, I also don't have much of a connection with galleries and conventional means of getting your work out there, because for me, again, it's about the story, it's about connecting with as wide an audience as possible, and to do that, you need to understand where the audience is, and it's not in a white-walled gallery. There it's going to be your friends, your family, and some other photographers. So generally speaking, even in the world and the era that we live in with Facebook and the likes, the possibility of getting a significant amount of footfall and therefore raising awareness about the issue is still going to be very limited, because they have to be in that physical space. And the same with publications. Magazines and the likes are focusing more on lifestyle stuff. Getting a newsworthy, what we photographers would consider newsworthy, so many publications will consider it not to be, and so trying to actually get your work published is a challenge. But that's where the internet gives you that freedom, that opportunity to connect with an audience internationally. And as of this afternoon, that's how many people had access to the internet, and that just goes up and up. So it's massive. You've got access to a massive audience when it's online. And so for me, I just feel that there's a real need, if your desire and your intention is to try and raise awareness and engage with as wide an audience as possible, you need to embrace web technology. You need to get your work online. And so we will take a quick break from this, and I'll just show you the website. So you'll have noticed the little logo, Foodies. So that was actually a dedicated website that I built from the outset. So to survive, which is often the case for photographers, especially in London, you need a second job. And for me, that has been building websites and SEO and things like that, which has actually worked out well, because I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't able to do that. Because that's how I was found. And so yeah, this website, I've built it from the start, because again, I just didn't want to wait for 2 years and then show a body of work in a gallery, because the issue is relevant now. And I just wanted to share the journey with everybody. So what I did, I created a photo diary, and so every time I go out, which is actually out of date, unfortunately, because yeah, as a freelancer, when you're doing something, a personal project, you've obviously got a limited amount of time to spend in this, because it's all voluntary. I haven't got any funding for it, so I just do it when I can. But I create this photo diary, and I've also been engaging with people within various organizations to write for the website. So to make it more than just about my work, it's also about informing people and raising awareness about the organizations. So I've actually invited people to write pieces for the website, which they have very kindly. And so it's growing into more of a resource. But I just feel that there's a need to kind of share the journey with people and not just sit on your work and then exhibit it 2 years down the line. Because especially when it's an issue that's relevant now and will be, you know, as you go along, and it's so important, then there's a need to get it out there and connect with as wide an audience as possible. And obviously now you've got Twitter, so I use Twitter. I've got a dedicated account for that, and Facebook page. And obviously, you know, the audience is small, so it's still, you know, just not that significant. But it all adds up and it all grows, and through that means on these different platforms, people have engaged with me, and you know, so I've been able to find out more about the organizations that are out there and build upon my work. So it's a great opportunity. You know, you need to get yourself out there and utilize web technology. Yeah, and also just kind of very briefly, this is a little tangent, but utilizing web technology again and trying to, this was a short-term project, but this is something that I'll be doing with the Food Waste Warriors in a similar vein. And
I'm Jasser Kokabi. I live in Northeast London and work in Hackney at the Homerton Hospital.
So I just went along, took portraits, and then asked people questions, and then you can listen.
I'll start from the beginning. So in the past, I used to be more politically active and engaged, and then.
So it just gives people more control over what they get exposed to and what they hear about. And again, it's just trying to use web technology as an effective means of just sharing more and giving people more control and giving them the opportunity to explore the subject in the way that they want to. But yeah, so I'd really try and explore web technology as best you can. And so just to kind of finish up, most effective way of communicating a message. Any suggestions? Nobody.
Hi. Sorry.
Somebody.
Here. Sorry.
Oh, great.
Sorry.
Happy days.
Well, just like you said before, like the internet and social media, and I think with the increasing popularity of Instagram would be like a great platform.
Yep.
Like,
I agree completely.
Because as someone who also uses everything constantly and constantly on my phone and everything, I would share, my likes would be shared, like whatever I liked on Instagram would immediately appear in someone else's newsfeed, and like that'll just raise awareness, and that you're always looking at it, and you're always exposed to the fact that food's being wasted.
Yeah, no, very much so. And the thing is, you know, you need to make a choice and decide whether you're going to kind of keep it under one banner, your personal kind of account, or whether you're going to separate it. And what I did was make the conscious decision to separate it. So I've got a portfolio site, and then I've got a site for my project, and you know, YouTube page and the likes. Everything's separate because it just allows me to explore that subject independently. It's optimized for Google. It means that it can live and breathe independently of what I do, and it doesn't get lost in amongst all the other work. So yeah, Instagram and all these different things are important. But, you know, again, you need to make that decision as to whether you're just going to mix it all up or if you're going to separate it out. And I personally feel that the best is to separate it.
I think the most effective way to communicate a message doesn't necessarily have to revolve around the medium, but if you can get your audience to empathize with what's going on, they're more likely to care about it, because if they can't connect with what it is, they won't care.
Exactly, yeah.
And so it doesn't matter if that's through a photograph or a song or a story, just if they can connect with what's happening.
Yep, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And hopefully that's what hopefully I've communicated effectively, but that's exactly the journey that I'm trying to explore, is that understand the audience, understand how to try and engage with them and how to do that effectively and create positive change, you know, some sort of behavioral change. But yes, any other suggestions? Yep, okay.
Doesn't there need to be an aspect of individual culpability and responsibility though? Or else how else would an individual consumer relate to what a supermarket is doing? Because, you know, I go to the supermarket and I just buy what I want, and I don't feel connected to what the supermarket does behind closed doors regarding their finances, or I don't feel connected to the USDA. So how would you bring food waste to an individual responsibility point of view, if that makes sense?
It does, yes. And it's a good question. And I don't necessarily have an answer for it. But I think ultimately it's about just raising awareness about the issue and about the possibilities, that what you can do. Because, yeah, the supermarkets have kind of dislocated us from where our food is coming from and the origins of it. And we need to value food more. And obviously that's great. If we grow our own food, then that happens, but not everybody has the luxury of having a garden or space to do that. So yeah, I think that to make that happen, you need to go beyond the issue of food waste and talk more about the value of food and our relationship with it and how to get people to just care about it more. Because obviously post-war era, everybody cared. Everybody wanted to reduce food waste, and everybody valued food immensely. And we've lost that. We've lost that respect and value for it, and that needs to be regained. But yeah, how to do that? It's, all I can do personally, I feel, is just do what I'm doing and try and do it better and better and engage with as wide an audience as possible. But because I know I was actually thinking, how the hell am I going to talk for 45 minutes? And it's well past 45 minutes. I told you I could ramble. This, everybody, is the most effective way of communicating a message. Based on all the research that I've done, all the books that I've read, reports, it's cats. So, cats are the best way of communicating a message. So there we go. So now that you've seen this, everybody's going to go away and stop wasting food simply because it's been communicated via the means of a cat. But yeah, so that is my presentation, my talk, and thank you. And I hope I didn't ramble too much. I hope I didn't bore you. This is the website that I've built. This is how you can get in touch or connect with me. And yeah, I hope it's been of interest. I hope it's been an interesting experience. It has for me, that's for sure.
So we're going to see a lot of cats.
Yes, indeed. Cats are going to appear more and more on the website. Might actually have to buy a cat and bring it with me everywhere I go. Yeah. But are there any, do we have time for any questions? Or
did you think about packaging? Because it's close to food. Food is packaged, and before you need it, and right after, it's in the way. It's a waste. Did you think about that in your work?
But I chose not to focus on it because I just feel that there is enough attention on packaging and the likes and recycling and things. I think that's quite well developed and quite mature, and there is a kind of general consciousness of the need. Whether people do it or not is obviously a different matter, but there is an awareness, whereas food waste, people are oblivious to it, you know, and the consequences of it and the extent of it, and especially at a farm level. So that's why I just kind of kept it focused on that, because I think, you know, as a photographic project, you really do need to, you know, I've just been doing a scattergun approach, seeing what sticks, and as I've learned more, then I've refined it and focused it. So now really I'm devoting more time in the farm, because I believe that is where the greatest amount of attention is required. But I could only do that by, you know, exploring the subject and getting to understand it more. And I think as a photographic project, it's good to, you know, don't feel, I think, sometimes perfectionism and you know, not really having a focus can hinder you, and you think, oh, Jesus, you know, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, so I won't do anything. It disables you, but I think you've just got to get out there, get your camera out, and explore a subject that you're passionate about. And don't worry, you know, you'll find your focus with time as you learn more about it, as you engage with more people and bump into more people and stories and stuff. You'll get focused, and you might kind of take a divergent path, but that's okay. You've just got to be open to it. But the key thing is just getting out there and making it happen, because I was fearful, you know, lack of self-confidence and self-belief, and never having done really a personal project before, and because I'm self-taught, all these, you know, doubts in my mind that hindered me. But, you know, the fact that I just got out there has just led to so many great things, you know, including this. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't just taken that first step of, you know, even though I just didn't know where it was going to take me, it's been an amazing journey. So, you know, if you are kind of lost and don't know what to do, just go out there and do it. Something, anything. Any other questions at all? We're going to leave them that kind of, yeah, pearl of wisdom. Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed it. But yeah, thank you.